Good morning, Liron.
Hey, good
And
morning, Stephen.
evening, afternoon, night, where you are?
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool. It's 8 p.m. now here. So yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's late over there.
Yes,
So
it is.
if you guys don't know, this is Liron. Liron is a fantastic watercolor artist who we're lucky enough to be working with to share his courses and his educational materials on Proko more recently. Uh, what would people uh where would people have seen you recently? Like online, where would they see your work normally?
It would probably be just the YouTube channel. It's where I'm
Okay.
most active. Either the YouTube channel or Instagram.
Okay. So that is the name that you guys are seeing on screen right there for your Instagram. And for your YouTube channel?
Just Liron Yanconsky, my full name. You'll find
Okay.
it. Or Liron Watercolor. There's just one.
That's fair. It's one of the nice things about having a more specific name.
Yes,
Uh,
one of the only nice things about it. But yeah.
that's fair. But yeah, so today we're going to be going over a video that is from your course. We pivoted a little bit after some like tech difficulties, and so we'll be doing
I
a
will
Q&A
mention right
session.
off the bat, I do have like an attempt I did like an hour or two ago. That's what I was supposed to demo, but a bit of
Mhm.
technical difficulties with the video. So my
Yeah.
apologies.
Oh, that's okay. That's how this goes. We've had so
Yeah.
many times where there's been some other difficulty that
Yeah.
popped up.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we're gonna be able to go over a video that we've got here, take some questions. You guys are lucky enough to be able to ask Liron all of the questions that you possibly want about watercolor.
Yes.
This is a focused
Please
Q&A
do.
session. So I'm gonna bring that up here on screen in the meantime. I hope like, and everyone who's here in the chat, let us know where you guys are here from. This will be available afterwards for you guys to replay, both in a couple different ways, because Liron's course has this video in it if you have the course. So I'm gonna go ahead and start playing this thing. And Liron, talk people through a little bit of your process,
Yeah,
just to
sure.
like kind of like prep something. And I'm gonna get some links dropped in here for everybody to be able to see.
Cool. Yeah, so basically, I think this is actually it's a good process to showcase how technique, as important as it is, specifically with watercolor, I'd say there are way more important things. I think at the end of the day, it does come down to your vision, the image you have in mind, the thing you want to communicate to the viewer. And if the subject that you're painting speaks to you, you'll probably be able to achieve quite a lot, even with inferior technique. This is why I always say when you're just getting started, it's okay that you still don't control you don't have that full gentle control. And with watercolor, that becomes even more important, by the way. So yeah, but with that said, in this process, I try to go for a bit of an organic feel where I start with the background specifically so that I can connect it to the hair. So what you're seeing right now is I'm trying to keep a soft edge to some extent, merging essentially the face with the background. I find that I like that effect sometimes. I also do that a lot, not just with portraits, but also with cityscapes, landscapes. I just like connecting things together. I find that it looks good. Kind of play on these edges. And what you'll see that's interesting, and Stephen, feel free to, if you see questions, I'm all for answering. I can do that simultaneously. But you'll see later how some of the technique, even I would say, is not as good as it could be. Some of the timing isn't necessarily as perfect as it could be, but it still kind of works.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of people who often have these ideas when they first try using watercolor, like for the very first time, that they're going to use it like other mediums. And I think it's drastically different than what people know from something that is like just using a pencil or a pen or anything like that. There's a different way that you kind of have to approach laying down watercolor. Was that ever a thing that you had to deal with when starting to use it?
Yeah, and I think even more than that, that's pretty much the reason I got so deep into watercolor. Something about how elusive it is really captivated me. And the more I do this, the more I kind of discover that I enjoy when I'm able to trust my instincts and intuition more and sketch less. Sometimes a very detailed sketch, it kind of deflates my inspiration for a painting, whereas if there's no sketch there, usually for a portrait you will need something, but especially if we're talking about cityscapes, landscapes, even figurative, by the way, I could go right into it and paint directly with the paint, I find it a little more inspiring. But yeah, watercolor is a dance. The main medium is water. The paint is kind of an addition to that. The
Okay, I
water
like
and
that.
how it behaves. That's how it works. The water is what carries it, and that's where the intuition is developed for how it will react. Before I even do something, I know pretty much what's going to happen.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's definitely it's this mind switch. I think even the idea of it being this additive medium versus something that's subtractive, like
Yes.
it's really interesting to do that kind of brain switch or see
Yeah.
people go through that learning process.
Yeah, like
Um,
what's going on right now in the process is something that you have to get down the first time or it's gone. While the paint it's starting to dry, it's maybe 20-30% dry, coming back with very thick paint. That's pretty much the only way to achieve this specific effect. So it's almost like going on a highway, right? You go on it and you have a few exit stops, but you have to keep going for a while.
That's fair. I do see a couple questions here in the chat. So I was
Yeah,
reading those
definitely.
right
Let's
now.
do this.
So Carlos Rue was asking, how do you learn to love a new medium or just experiment in general? I have trouble getting out of my comfort zone, and the cost of things doesn't help. So I guess, yeah. So if it's something that is more expensive, so like, I don't know, something like oil, people have a harder time learning to take that chance and then also stick with it. Was watercolor new for you ever after you using other things?
Yeah, it was new. So I've been drawing and sketching pretty much ever since I can remember myself.
Mhm.
Watercolor, I started about 8 years ago. I never really had that problem. Watercolor is cheaper, the supply is cheaper, everything is cheaper. So I never really had that issue of worrying about wasting supplies. I very early on understood that they kind of need to serve my purpose. You can do a lot actually to save on supplies. You can paint on both sides, especially when you're getting started. You're not that good anyway.
Mhm.
Cheap paints, I can later on, people will definitely ask about supplies. So yeah, there are some things you can kind of cheap out on and some things I wouldn't, like paper. Um, yeah, that really hurt the process and the result. But you can work with everything. You can use pretty much whatever you want. It'll still work out.
Have you ever done that kind of thing where it's now that you know the medium itself, then you'll go back and try to use some like child's set of watercolors?
I haven't, and these videos do tend to be popular, like $1,000 set versus. I'm so bad with these videos. My titles are usually not clickbaity or not. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. I have tested out some paints that were really bad, really inferior. Um, I had a really hard time working with them.
Mm.
Paper, which I would recommend for beginners to not skimp on, I could deal with cheaper paper. But paints right now, if they don't do what I want, I'm so accustomed to just having it look the way I want that it's a problem. Um, Definitely. Brushes I can work with like a twig probably. It wouldn't have
Yeah.
much coverage, but I could use it.
Yeah, and
So
like I
yeah.
think like a large portion of that, like what you said was that the water itself, it does such a large part of it. It's not like
Yeah.
when you're using a brush pen or something, if the tip of it sucks, you get these like brutally different characteristics with no like fine control. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's another one here. So first and foremost, someone said you're really good. I agree.
Thank you.
uh, that was Coloring Puddles that said this. And then Anthony Damazin in the chat asked, has Liron had any formal training? What's his art education history?
Yeah, so I have no formal training whatsoever. Yeah, but education has changed drastically over the past decade. Technology. So I knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to do watercolor. So I didn't really need to get a degree and kind of expose myself to other supplies. Could it have been beneficial? Maybe. Could I have made connections? Quite possibly. But because I knew I wanted to teach and I wanted to share online, it was the most straightforward thing. So I just went for it. I have, of course, I took Proko's anatomy course and a
Oh,
bunch of other things when I wanted to dive deeper on anatomy, sketching, all of that good stuff. Because I find that watercolor suffers a bit from it's the least formally trained thing. So you just end up with a lot of artists who paint really nicely, but then they don't know how to draw the people, the figures in their scene, for example. Everything looks fantastic, and then the figures look like very awkward. I didn't want to be that.
Yeah, that's the classic foible of a person who does like landscapes of like any medium as well.
Yeah, I didn't know that, actually. I'm not that well versed in other media. I do enjoy oils and acrylics and gouache. I enjoy looking at them, but yeah, I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, it's like this thing where you love these like big swaths of colors, these beautiful vistas, or some like night scene, but then you go to like make a person in there, and it's like, oh my god, like, this is terrible.
Yeah. So true.
It's a problem. I mean, honestly, frankly, as a person who does photography, I also suffer from this. I do mostly like landscapes or interesting spaces. But then if you put me in a room where I'm supposed to take some nice portrait of somebody, I'm not going to be able to do this.
Yeah, I get it. It's a different. Yeah, it's so actually, this reminds me of an interesting experiment I did when I feel very comfortable with one subject matter. I ask myself what it is about it, because I love cars. I actually told you about it. I love painting cars. I don't know, you probably won't be able to see, but this is work in progress.
Okay, I like this.
Yeah, so it's tarp. I did a tarp painting. Now this is tarp 2. It's a bit of an obscure and funny, thing to paint. Here's another one. It's kind of funny.
Dude, that one's good. It's a good use of the lighting in there.
Yeah, thank you. So what I try and do is I think, okay, what is it about a cityscape that comes so easily to me? And then when I, let's say, approach a portrait, it all falls apart. And I find that it's not really in a technique or something you do. It's a bit more about your perception. I think the way I got it was I noticed some artists that are crazy good in watercolor portraits. When I see their landscapes, I'm like, it's not average, it's above average, but it's nowhere close to the same level. So you can actually, if you really dive deeper on that and you think to yourself, what is it about this subject? It's usually the things you notice. And the more you notice, the more you're able to portray.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah,
it's kind of like anatomy, by the way. When you notice the tilt of the hip and all of that, sorry, I might be a little delayed, that you know how to see it in people that you sketch or paint, and then you know how to include it. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, you're fine. Yeah, no, I agree completely. There's just like this like mode switch, you don't know what you don't know until you do.
Yeah.
I was actually going to ask, so I was curious. There's a thing that I often see that I don't know if people are kind of like, if it's a consideration of the medium that people often lean into, or if it's just a thing that a lot of people who use watercolors and opaque watercolors with gouache just really enjoy. But oftentimes there's this thing that you'll see pretty often, and I think was a little bit in the bridge car one that you showed, where there's this if oftentimes when people do digital media, like digital painting or anything like that, they have these like fully preserved highlights and shadows where everything is within the range of the eye perceiving it. Oftentimes for watercolor, there's this thing where highlights will look blown out and fully lean into the white of the paper showing through. Do you think that's just like something that's inherent to the medium itself, or is just a preference of those who use watercolor?
I think when you work with a medium that's kind of light to dark and you always layer, you never almost paint light over dark. You don't paint the highlights themselves. It's almost like the highlights they are important, but the way you achieve them is kind of an afterthought. So people just skip them. They don't give them enough attention. I think that's the thing. It's almost like every medium has its own inherent, what's the word I'm looking for?
Characteristics?
No, actually, it's a different one. Pathology. I wanted to say.
Okay.
It's the common thing that people mess up. With watercolors, it's that. Yeah, you don't usually. I sometimes paint them. I use designer's gouache. I mix it with watercolor. The Brooklyn Bridge painting you saw is a mix of watercolor and gouache. So yeah, but I get it. I do see that. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember being a little kid and seeing it. And the first place I noticed it was I'm an anime and manga fan, and they would often
Okay. Yeah.
use
Same here.
watercolors. Yeah, so like you know feel like so like for Oda for One Piece like
Yeah, his work is wow, it's incredible. The color covers, all of that. The older ones, of course, are my favorites. But yeah.
yeah. Like they're like you'd see these pieces that would suddenly have color applied to them, oftentimes with watercolor, like you said in the earlier chapter pages. And there would always be
Yeah.
this like large swath of the highlights that were just like it's paper white, you know?
Yeah. It's faster, mangakas, they are under crazy pressure. So
Absolutely.
it's much more efficient. You just skip over it and that's it. They will do crazy things to be efficient. They'll like make the whole thing higher key so they don't have to, they'll make everything super effective. So yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting one to see people use the same medium in so many different ways.
Yeah. One I like, another one is Naruto's colored artwork, either for the volume covers. It's insane. It's really, really good.
Yeah, absolutely. That was another one that
Got
was
a
a
ton
big
more, but
inspiration
yeah.
for me as a kid.
Yeah.
So let's see. There were some other questions. I think so. There's
Yeah.
one. Someone asked. This one is asking about a brush pen. They're specifically to me. I have not found a good digital brush pen yet.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, Liron. Like, have you searched for a digital brush pen alternative?
To create like digital watercolors,
Like if anything, like, is there a digital
or
tool that
just a
you have enjoyed?
general brush, like a digital brush that actually feels like a brush. No,
Uh-huh.
not really. I'll be honest, I'm not as like, I do digital, I enjoy it. I sketch sometimes digital, and I love the feel of pencil. But like in Clip Studio Paint and stuff like that. But brushes, it's tricky. I think I tried one app. I don't remember which one it was, when we were on vacation in Venice, and I painted on my iPad. It was supposed to simulate watercolor. It was so bizarre. Like I got how it worked, but it was completely different.
What was it that you think was missing as a person who's so deeply familiar with that medium?
It runs very deep, because when you paint on paper, you get, first off, you get more feedback in terms of friction. But I often paint on cold press paper, which has texture to it. So every brush mark you see here has text. You can tell there's texture to the paper. So you don't get that, and that's a completely different feeling. The feeling of bristles on paper. Now the physics of the paint wasn't as good too, of course. I think these are the main ones, I would say.
Yeah.
You could probably just have like instead of a stylus or a pen, you could probably have a brush. I think that it exists, like just an actual brush, but it's meant for digital. I guess I suppose there is something like that. Of course, it won't be the exact same. Not now, maybe in the future. No.
Yeah, sometime in the long from now future.
Yeah.
We have some more like deep questions about
Yeah,
how
go
to use
ahead.
watercolor.
My
And then the
favorite.
next one after that, I want to make sure that we tell people we will hit on is materials. Because you mentioned the paper that you use.
Yeah, I have a lot to say about materials, even though it's the most the least, also in my opinion, but I have a lot to say about it. So
okay.
Yeah.
I like this. So Roseanne Borst here in the chat was asking, how do you learn to control the water/pigment ratio with pan watercolors?
Yeah, with pens, it's the same, but sometimes pens, they dry harder. If they mean like the actual cakes, I actually just now opened this so I can see it too. But yeah, if they mean, yeah, okay, pen. I like tubes better, but pens are okay too. Some pigments are just super hard to re-wet, so sometimes that's where I would go looking, instead of trying to rub the brush against it and really work hard to produce a dark value. But assuming that's not a problem, it does come down to experimentation. There are some exercises, the value scale, just like you would do with a pencil, try and get the whole breadth of values. So that's one option, but I think it comes down to playing with the medium and really allowing yourself to do what you want with it, kind of find your own curiosity, like what would happen if I do this? What would happen if I do that? If you follow tutorials on YouTube, it's good for inspiration. It's good for some epiphanies, but at the end of the day, you will have to find what fascinates you and explore that. That's how you get artists that are at the top of their game and their art looks like no one else's, which I'm hoping to get there. I think some aspects of my paintings do look like it's just me, and some don't. That's just a reality.
Yeah. Most people struggle with that kind of thing. Like, you want to find that thing that is decidedly yours, without having it be just like, I make bad paintings and no one else makes them bad in the way that I do.
Yeah, and it never works by, I'm going to try and find my style. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
It happens very organically over time.
It's like that. There's a person that you'll see who's done their hair in the one way for a long time, and slowly over time it goes from being this one version of it to like having its own characteristics that they've slowly like ended up morphing into the thing.
I like that thing a lot, actually. Yeah.
Like having the thing kind of develop in this way.
Yeah, exactly. You become kind of your own meme, and you just become more unique. Yeah,
absolutely.
There's almost something rebellious about it. Sometimes I'll do something just to annoy people who say that's how it should be done. I just do something weird. Sometimes it doesn't work out, and I kind of destroy the painting. But sometimes it does work.
Yeah, no, like you said, like it's all about that exploration. Like, take some risks, whether that's with the medium itself or the tools that you use. There's a question here from Chadestioko. I don't know. I'm guessing. They said, Liron, you're the first course I bought on Proko. I'm learning a lot.
Amazing. Well, thank you.
Do you ever find yourself waiting for a spot to dry when doing watercolors? What do you do while waiting?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. It's something I haven't thought of in a long time. It used to happen a lot. It doesn't happen anymore. Now it's not like, I found a way to dry the water faster other than using a hairdryer or a heat gun. It doesn't happen to me as often because I paint larger. When I used to paint small, like A4 and even half A4, I don't know what that would be, A3, I don't know. So when I used to paint these small sizes, there's such a small area to cover that you do end up having to wait. But in the painting I just showed you, the tarp thing, one section is drying, I work on another section. I could probably paint the whole thing with no breaks whatsoever. But yeah, but it's okay if it happens. If you have a spot with direct sunlight where you paint, it could really help. It dries it much faster, flattens the paper completely. That was my face, by the way. I had to get it close.
Was that you coming in to like blow something, checking a camera? What would you
just looking up close at the layer to see exactly what it looks like, how wet it was, or whatever.
I see. Yeah. So for those who might not be as familiar with this, I'm assuming that most of the people in this chat have at least some familiarity with watercolor. I'm not really one of those people. So the thing that you're painting on here, you have the you said that you work with was it a block that you said that you use?
What, for the under the paper?
For the paper itself.
Oh yeah. So I buy either in a roll and then I cut it, or sheets. That's kind of, I don't know, they're big and then I just fold them in half, fold in half, cut. It's paper. It's just paper made of cotton. This one has texture. I don't know. Hopefully you can.
And you said you use cold press paper.
And you can see that. Yeah, cold press is the one with texture. And hot press is what usually is used more in illustrations and like usually manga artists, what we mentioned earlier, that's done on hot press. There's a very strong divide. People who paint landscapes in watercolor very rarely use hot press. It's just, there's no real reason to it. It's a matter of personal taste. But yeah, it's cotton is important because it needs to absorb the paint really well. There are other types of paper. There's like pulp. which works, but you're more limited in how many layers you can do. Things kind of dry on top of the paper instead of being absorbed, so you have to learn to work with it. Yeah, the normal kind of cotton paper is the thing that is the most versatile. You can get the most out of it, I think.
Okay. And is there any consideration, because you have it taped down for a couple reasons, I would assume?
Yeah,
It's
so
for
I
masking
actually
for the
I'll
edge.
have to revise the taping down of paintings. I have stopped taping them down. That's an
Interesting.
update. Yeah, if you're here, you get to hear it. I mentioned it somewhere else, but so the thing is, when you tape the painting down, when it's wet, it's gonna start to expand. So you'll get some waviness because it has nowhere to expand to. But the advantage is once it dries flatter. The problem is sometimes the buckling is so bad that paint starts to pool in different areas. So what I am currently doing is I don't tape usually. Taping it's nice if you want to lift it with you have like a plank of wood or something underneath it. You want to just play around with it. But I prefer now to just hold a piece of paper, manipulate it how I want in terms of angle and flow of the water. And the downside of not taping is it will have a bit of a bend to it, but it doesn't matter because you frame it anyway. Yes, sorry. You frame it anyway, so it doesn't really matter. When you frame it, it's going to be completely flat, so who cares? So I'd much rather have a more convenient process. Some beginners find that it's easier to tape, and if that's you, go ahead and do that. But yeah.
Okay. Is there any sort of downside to having it taped? And like does it keep it next to a material that might not let it dry as freely?
No, that's usually not a problem. By the way, one kind of advantage of taping it is you do get a clean border when you remove it. That is something you don't get when you don't tape. I just paint to the edge of the paper. So yeah, but the frame guy will add that frame anyway if you want.
Oh, you go take it to somebody to get it like matted and put in a frame?
Yeah, if I do, then you can add whatever kind of frame you want. But if you want to save money, because it costs extra, of course, to add that little mat. I don't know what you call it, matting. I call it
Yeah, like the mat board.
Yeah, exactly. So you can just tape like an inch or so from the edge. You have a natural kind of matting, so you don't have to pay for it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay. So there's some other questions in here.
Yes.
So Gannon Beck, a Proko course taking legend, asked, I'm interested in portraits, the figure, and urban sketching. How much of that will be covered?
Yeah, all of it is covered pretty much. I think the main thing for watercolor, both in the frustration-free watercolor course and in the watercolor realism course, which are both included in the bundle, it's more about, especially for the frustration-free watercolor course, it's more about understanding where to find that freedom in painting. What you have to understand is watercolor is vastly different to less flowy media. You are on a shorter time frame, and the way you react to what's happening on the paper, sometimes it gives you gifts that sometimes, if you're a beginner, you don't know to recognize, but you can make a great use of them. Sometimes beginners try to control too much of watercolor, and what they end up with is you can tell they forced it to do something that was unnatural, and even if the result is, you can kind of label it realistic, something's missing. So it doesn't matter what subjects I demonstrate. What's more important is that you will understand where to find that freedom, and then you can apply it to any subject matter. The way I teach is usually very evergreen when it comes to the subject matter. I try to focus on concepts or things that are just facts, like how water and paint behave. I don't try to tell you how to do things. But yeah, all of these subject matter, regardless of what I said, are there. You get a nice nice cityscape. You get a bit of landscapes. You get a bit of still life, portraits. There is one portrait in the frustration-free watercolor course. There are two portraits in the watercolor realism course. That's one of them. Okay. The other one is, I think technique-wise is much more on point. So you get to also see the perfect timing for almost every brush stroke. Yeah.
Okay. While we're asking questions here about the course, I would say the one thing I think we should always ask about a course is, what do you think that is something that was kind of missing from other education that you're running across that made you decide, I Liron need to make a course?
Yeah, so this may sound kind of bombastic. Everything. If I'm being honest, yeah, watercolor is. I don't know what it's like in other media. I do follow some oil painting channels and stuff like that, but it's just the entire approach. Usually, it's the same kind of problems every teacher has of trying to tell people how to do things, and it doesn't come from a place of negativity or anything like that. It's just that everyone believes that the way they're doing it is kind of the way. It's not even out of ego. They just really think it's the best way and it will be the easiest. And it's just usually not. There are a lot of things you can do that make the process easier, more effective. And no one talks about freedom in watercolor. No one talks about that. The frustration-free watercolor course, the whole idea is freedom. No one talks about freedom. Everyone talks about being accurate, technique. You have to do this, you have to do that. No one approaches it the way I do. That's a fact, at least when the course was out. Maybe it's different now. And maybe you could find like a YouTube video that has a similar vibe to it, but nothing is comprehensive as a course. Nothing is comprehensive as hundreds of videos. I felt that need.
Okay. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think oftentimes one of the things that people don't really consider for a person who makes a course isn't just that they're like repeating the educational bits that someone else has said to them, but when you go to teach something is where you learn what is missing, because you often go to look at what else other people have put out before to make sure and verify your information, or like make sure that it just doesn't already exist, because why put all your time into making something that's already out there? So I'm glad you know that there's those things in there.
Yeah.
There are a couple other questions here. I do want to point out, so the demo that we were showing, that wrapped up. This was the final piece that you had from this demo. You can see those nice crispy edges you were talking about in there, all down these sides.
And when you look at the face itself, like some of the washes, the layers aren't as smooth. But the thing is, I was really inspired to paint this portrait. So it kind of doesn't matter. As I mentioned, if you have the vision and you start to see it connect in your own mind, people will buy into it, so to speak. So it really kind of fades into the details, and I really like the way this one turned out.
Yeah, no, this turned out great. I like the different bits in here for the added highlights, the flyaways.
Yeah, that's just for fun,
Yeah, it's that, like when you put the little dot of the eye catch into the eye, little
highlight.
Yeah,
exactly.
So I think there are a couple other questions in here that I think we can talk about in relation to this. And then I just want to ask you about the tools that you do use. So we have Dandy Ben, who's asking, hey, I'm new to watercolor, and I was curious as to how the light to dark principle works. I noticed you started with the dark parts of the painting before getting to the light areas.
Yeah, so that's because I haven't followed the light to dark adage here. That's what I was kind of saying in the beginning. I wasn't phrasing it this way, but I wanted this to feel holistic. So I actually just went for it and started at some point. I will often just break this rule and start with a mid value. It doesn't really matter. The advantage of working light to dark is you can kind of, if you see things in the way of, okay, here are all the highlights I need to skip and kind of leave them even paper white, I'm going to paint everything but that. And then next, okay, let me recognize and kind of find some of the mid values that go a little darker. Let me paint just those. That's the main reason why watercolor is done that way. It allows you to also be very mindful of where your highlights and the areas you skip are, because traditionally you wouldn't paint light over dark. So you kind of have to leave the highlights blank, whether it's paper white or you paint a second layer and you leave the previous layer showing. To me personally, I often find this process way too mechanical and and boring, I like to start with the part that interests me about the subject matter. Sometimes it does lend itself really well to light to dark, and I'll just go with that. Other times, I'll do any of the other options. So yes, you're correct. I have not followed the light to dark thing here at all. For some videos, you will see me following it. For this one, not really.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's honestly one of the most interesting parts from all the instructors and people that we work with is often seeing how they approach something that's different from what is the preconceived and taught idea of something.
Yeah.
Also, it's really hard to sometimes choose to go out on a limb and say, this is the way that you should probably approach it if you're a beginner. But also, I don't do any of that now because I've been doing this for 10 years.
Yeah, I try not to do that because I don't think the 10 years is what made the difference.
Okay.
I think what makes the difference is you could say it's the experience, of course, but I don't know. It's hard to put into words. At the end of the day, yes, the time does give you experience, but you can kind of skip a lot of the mistakes that I made if from the beginning you know to not constrain yourself to one way of doing it or a couple of ways of doing it, or the very common kind of principles that people tout that don't always hold water. I'm not going to do something just because that's how it's taught. I'm going to try it out. I'm going to experiment with it.
Yeah. Once you know the how, like the why and the how of something, it really lets you do some more kind of like jazz and invention on the way.
Yes.
I guess let's see here. I think we should get into some materials because people are asking some questions that are more materials leaning. If you're okay with that.
Definitely, yes. I have no secrets.
I'm gonna put you up on the solo cam. There might be we might have some drop frames and everything, but don't worry, guys.
So you want me to actually show stuff? That's the thing? Okay.
Sure. Yeah. And so the questions that we have that are outstanding right now are people asking about the brand of paints that you use, which you did cover a little bit. Your tape, and then just some other materials. We'll go through all of them here. What do you use? You're setting up your painting to sit down. What you got?
Yeah. So generally, I will have like the three main ones is palette, paper, and brushes. I think, and then there's a lot of extra stuff that's really, you kind of just have to have like water and you have to put the water in something. You have the pencil, eraser, all of that, the tape if you want a tape. And some, I would say, additional tubes even that aren't on the palette. My current palette, and I have many, I just kind of go with the flow and refill them with whatever I have and feel like. I like using this one. This is quite a well-known one. It's the Magello 18 well airtight, whatever name it has. You can find it on Amazon. It used to be cheaper. It's gotten more expensive because everyone started using it. It does have large mixing areas, which is really good. That's what my palette looks like. Maybe there are dropped frames, but this is the disgusting mess that is my palette. That's how I don't care for it to be clean. That's the reason I don't try and dirty it on purpose because everyone asks about it. I just don't really care about it being clean. That's the thing. So yeah, that's the thing. And sometimes I'll have another one here just for extra paints. So I have, so I'll have this one. This is actually a custom one that a follower of mine made me and sent it to me. So thank you, Marjorie. Much appreciated. I have a bunch of these. Now, in terms of brands of paint, I think you can't really go wrong with Daniel Smith, SAA, same one. They're pretty much same factory as far as I know, exact same production value, whatever. I really like White Knights. White Knights are really good and cheaper. They're kind of student grade, but not really. They're artist grade. They're really good quality, good light fastness. These paints won't fade. It's in the past watercolors would fade. That would be the main issue with watercolor. These don't fade. I have this random tube of Designer's Gouache by Winsor Newton. I like this. a lot. It helps me with either highlights, bringing them back. I like to mix it with watercolors. Wash watercolor, it's pretty much the same. Just the amount of one of the components is different, but it's both water-based. It's pretty much acts the same. You can mix them freely. Brushes. Let's see here. I have a few that I like. Escoda are the best when it comes to having a good tip. I have a lot of these. I hope this helps, because usually I think, again, materials are like the least important thing, but I know people ask, so yeah. Michael Soloviev brush. He's a wonderful watercolor artist. He has his own set. I like this one because it has, usually flat brushes have, I don't know why, they have an issue with water capacity. Their water capacity is really bad. This one doesn't have that issue, maybe because it's just 5 groups of bristles that are bound. It's really good, and I need a lot of water capacity. I don't want to keep having to recharge. And then Levinson brushes. These are among my favorites too. I actually have a collaboration with Tracy Levinson. You can check these out. They're a little pricier, but one major advantage, even if you go with his or anyone else's that does bamboo brushes, they're way more ergonomic. They're more like, they won't destroy your fingers. They won't do like calluses. Some brushes, especially metal ones, and the Escodas do come in wooden ones. This is just the travel version, so it's collapsible. These will create really bad calluses, whereas these, you can rotate them. It's going to distribute everything evenly, so that's very useful. Okay. So I quite like these ones. I have a nice water bucket. It's this thing.
It's high-tech?
It's high-tech. It has 3 compartments, which, one you use for cool colors, one you use for warm colors, or if you're like me, you just use them interchangeably, however you kind of feel like. And paper is big. So paper, I won't compromise. It's either Arch, it's written Arches, or Saunders Waterford. These are, or Bauhong. Bauhong is good. They feel almost exactly the same. Paper is the most important one. You can, again, succeed with many different types, even non-cotton papers, but it is the one that will have the most effect over the end result, like physically, because you hold the paper in your hand, the paint's kind of set into it, but the paper is what you have. It's going to affect the way it looks greatly. Not to mention the painting experience and process itself, but just the end result it's very felt with paper.
And you said you start from a roll?
Yeah, so I have like a huge Arch roll somewhere here in the studio. I bought it because it allows you to paint as large as, it just allows you to paint larger because you can roll it out as much as you want. So if you use just not a pad, you can use pads as well. I don't use as much pads anymore, but if you buy, what do you call these? I forgot the word for it actually. But if you buy just the large pieces of watercolor paper, you
like
are limited in size. Yeah, just loose sheets. Yeah. If you buy a roll, then it's 120 centimeters on the shorter side, and then you can just roll it out as much as you want. And I actually painted, my followers will be familiar with it. I painted, my largest painting to date is 1 meter over 2.5. And I used the roll for that.
Nice.
Yeah, and it's very horizontally oriented.
I see. You said a word earlier that was about the bridge painting that you had. You said tarp? Was that about?
Yeah, it's just there's tarp and then there's the bridge painting. The tarp is just people cover their cars sometimes, so it's this one.
I see.
Yeah,
I see. I thought you were saying something about the material that you had used. And so I was very curious about what the idea of
no. You could paint with a tarp. I guess you could kind of soak it in the water and then just put it on paper. People do these strange things, either with a sponge or twigs. I often see on YouTube Shorts just a random dude with a twig and ink. He's doing some stuff on paper. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely some odd stuff on the internet where people are trying to get those clicks.
Yes.
So let's see. I think there's one question here. I'm not sure exactly the thing that they're going with here.
Mhm.
Not being most familiar with watercolor. But messages from benevolent beings asked, what do you think of Agnes Cecile's style of watercolor?
Let me Google that real quick.
Because I don't know.
Cecile. I'm actually familiar with a lot of watercolorists, but not all of them. Yeah, it's really nice. Okay, I'm familiar with this kind of style. I know someone here locally who paints a very similar style. It's really good. The thing with these kinds of styles is there's the problem is not with Agnes's work, but the problem is with everyone else who sees it and just kind of copies it, but copies it in an inferior way. And what I mean by inferior is not that they're not as good, but it's just not as original. You can tell it's not as unique. And her work is quite unique. I like what I'm seeing. Yeah, I like it a lot.
Yeah.
It's very different from my style. It's a bit more, colorful and a bit more portraity.
Yeah. I'm going to try
Yeah.
to share this so people can kind of see a little bit of what it is that you're looking
Yeah,
at.
exactly. So if you want to see a really good one of hers, scroll a little down.
Okay.
On the left, there's a blue-haired thing.
Is it
More
this
down, more. No, not this one. Keep going. This
different blue hair.
Yeah, different blue hair. It's where is it? I'm seeing it on my results. Maybe don't have any picture open to the right. No, oh yeah, here's the one in the center lower. Yeah, exactly. So
Okay.
this one is clearly like a standout piece to me. If you're kind of thinking about what I enjoy looking at and what I appreciate, this one is clearly like thought out, very interesting. The hair has this kind of a galaxy effect with stars. And even if you look at the face, there's a lot of like warms and cools on the nose that I like a lot. Some of the other ones feel a little more like I could see other artists doing them, but this one, yeah, I like this one a lot.
Yeah, interesting. I do like that you liked the blue one, where I've seen a lot of like cool leaning imagery in your pieces.
Yeah, I personally am a big fan of warm colors. I don't know why. I used to like blue like as my favorite color as a kid, but ever since I started watercolor, my favorite is the warm kind of side of the spectrum. Reds, yellows, pinks, oranges, everything in between is my favorite for now. I don't know why. I enjoy it more.
I mean, like sometimes you just got to mix it up,
It's
and so
super
it's just that
random,
opposite.
but yeah. I think it's because the shadows tend to be a little more gray. Even on my face, you can see the side is more gray. And then as you switch over to the light side, it's coming into the light. So I don't know. I like that a lot.
Okay. I guess so. We've been through the entirety of what that video was, and we had talked about because of the technical things that we kind of hit here. We were talking about the idea of doing another live stream on the 20th, where you get to actually take people through the process that you work through, answer questions along the way. So for anyone who's looking for a little bit more of that, we'll get to do that on the 20th of this month. But that doesn't mean that you can't get a whole bunch of Liron right now, because Liron has a course on Proko. And it is 20% off right now during our Black Friday sale. So if you guys like anything that you did see here so far, go ahead, check it out. It's really good. You've seen plenty of people here in the chat who've already talked about the idea of joining the course and having enjoyed it a whole lot. It's something different, I think, than what we normally have on Proko, where so often we're dealing with like a dry medium, not as much painting just in general, much less watercolor itself. So maybe you haven't learned this, or you learned it from somewhere else. No matter what, though, if you can't afford a course, there's going to be a link in the description below, and then also in the chat right now that will take you to Liron's YouTube channel, which you should go check out. And you can also, and I swear it's the last thing that I'll plug, you can find Liron over here and on this tag below on social media, where you guys can find out more about his process and keep up to date with him, all again for free.
Yeah, I have way too much content for a human to consume, so just know you're not gonna have a lack of anything.
Yeah, you'll keep them rich with watercolor content.
Yes.
Is there anything that you want to say before we wrap up here?
Yeah, just discover, explore, and go ahead and see what you love, what you enjoy. I think that's the most important thing. You don't have to force yourself to love a new medium. If you don't like it, don't use it.
Yeah.
I've always been selfish in my art. I just, if I don't enjoy it, I'm not gonna paint it. If I won't,
Yeah, don't force yourself into something that you don't like.
Yeah, I think that's where you get those really good results and standout paintings, by actually just doing the thing you want.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's good to
Thank you
get to
for
hang
having
out
me,
and talk a
Stephen.
little bit. I guess we'll see you again on the 20th, and hopefully every
Yeah,
single
we'll
person
figure it
who's
out.
here in the chat, we'll see you guys here again as well. And we hope you guys
Yeah.
have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Bye.